By the 16th of September, when the South African Air Force began its strike operations, FAPLA's 47 Brigade had already marched around the source of the Lomba River, the last natural obstacle between the FAPLA brigades and Mavinga. The South African Air Force had long prided itself as the most formidable on the continent, and they were eager for an opportunity to demonstrate their awesome potential. 9 Mirage F-1AZs, each armed with 4 to 6 250 kg pre-fragmentation bombs, would be joined by 4 Buccaneers, each carrying 10 250 kg pre-fragmentation bombs. Altogether, FAPLA's 47 Brigade would be subjected to 84 bombs in this early morning raid. The aircraft attacked at extreme low level to stay beneath FAPLA's radar cover. The Mirages were debuting a novel tactic known as toss bombing or vergooi. The aircraft would approach their target at treetop level, flying at over 600 miles an hour. Guided to the target by the Mirage's sophisticated onboard navigation system, the pilot would pull up into a steep climb at a predetermined point just outside of the range of the enemy's air defenses. At the correct moment, the bombs were released to fly in a wide ballistic trajectory onto the target. The Mirage would immediately take evasive maneuvers and get back down to low level as soon as possible. The Buccaneers, with their 2-man crew, longer range and sophisticated onboard electronic countermeasures, could attack from a variety of angles and altitudes and still deliver their heavy payload with remarkable precision. On the 16th of September, at the same time as the Mirages and the Buccaneers were plastering 47 Brigade with a deluge of high explosives, the G5s were working the brigade over in preparation for a ground attack by elements of 61 mech. The G5 howitzer was the star weapon of the war, able to deliver its 155mm shell with pinpoint accuracy nearly 40 kilometers away. Colonel Ferreira hoped to drive the 47 Brigade out of their positions where they were dug in on the south bank of the Lomba River. Commandant Smith, commander of 61 mech, was not having a good day, however. The bush was much thicker than anticipated, and FAPLA had time to recover from the early morning bombardment to bring down mortars on the attacking SADF troops. A furious mortar battle commenced as the Rattles tried to keep in formation whilst advancing in the thick bush. At 14:30, 61 mech suddenly made contact with FAPLA infantry and tanks on the northern flank. With visibility down to 50 meters and under increasingly heavy FAPLA artillery, Commandant Smith decided to pull back and regroup. With 47 Brigade firmly dug into an area of deep bush on the southwestern side of the Lomba, Colonel Ferreira realized that he would have to wait for the right opportunity before he could use 61 mech to deliver the knockout blow. To this end, all FAPLA brigades, but especially 47 Brigade, was subjected to round-the-clock bombardment by the G5s, multiple rocket launchers, and 120mm mortars. Early on in the battle, South African recce's and artillery observers had infiltrated into positions overlooking the FAPLA brigades. Any vehicle or men who appeared out in the open were soon obliterated by the highly accurate and effective artillery. With a range of over 35 kilometers, no FAPLA or Soviet artillery could match the G5s in either range or accuracy, and FAPLA was forced to rely on MiGs flying overhead to find and hunt the South African artillery. The artillerymen always had advanced warning of MiG activity from recce teams, and they were masters of camouflaging their guns and equipment in the thick bush. No FAPLA airstrikes ever found or damaged the South African artillery, which was soon back in operation as soon as the MiGs left the area. With the FAPLA brigades deployed in deep bush, the South Africans deployed one of their newest weapons to find them and provide real-time intelligence. Remotely piloted vehicles, nicknamed Garas, were flown by 10 Squadron from their base in Mavinga. On the 20th and 21st of September, the RPVs flew over the positions of all the forward brigades. FAPLA and the attached Russian advisors had great difficulty in locking onto the small target as it cruised overhead. With its small radar cross-section, the Gara was confounding the powerful Soviet air defenses. Eventually, after over a dozen unsuccessful attempts, an SA-8 battery managed to lock onto the minuscule drone. The drone went down, but only after 17 SAMs had been fired at it on the afternoon of the 21st. As the Soviets reloaded their missiles and savoured their successful strike, the South Africans were not letting up in their assault. Artillery observers had marked the position of the SAM battery from the smoke of their launchers, and soon 155 more shells were on their way. They knew the shelling was successful, as missiles streaked into the air at random. With 47 brigades stranded alone on the south bank of the Lomba, it now became imperative for FAPLA to resupply them. It fell on 21 Brigade to finally cross the Lomba and bring supplies to 47 Brigade. The FAPLA offensive was losing momentum in face of heavy South African firepower. Accordingly, 21 Brigade issued orders to smoke out the South Africans from their positions south of the bridgehead. South African electronic intelligence overheard this message, and the SADF High Command feared that the FAPLA was about to use chemical weapons, as they had previously against UNITA. In addition to donning their protective masks, the South Africans withdrew from their positions. As such, when FAPLA shelled the SADF positions with one of the heaviest barrages of the war so far, the positions had already been vacated. Believing the way to be clear, 21 Brigade rushed 3 columns of vehicles and infantry towards the crossing. Unfortunately for FAPLA's 21 Brigade, the first SADF troops to return to the scene were the artillery observers and the anti-tank squadron. Under devastating South African artillery fire, 21 Brigade pulled back to their start-off point. The attempt to cross the Lomba and resupply 47 Brigade had been a failure. On the 16th of September, a high-level meeting was held in Mavinga between SADF top commanders General Geldenhuys, General Meyer, tactical commanders like Colonel Ferreira, and UNITA commanders like General Ben, General Bok, and UNITA leader Jonas Savimbi. At this meeting, it was eventually agreed that though the FAPLA offensive had been halted for the time being, it had not been stopped completely. Savimbi felt that FAPLA would dig in their present positions for the time being and probably renew their push to Mavinga in December, when they had stabilized their positions and received reinforcements. The SADF felt, therefore, that maximum effort should be applied now, whilst FAPLA was in a weakened state. They were determined to knock out the FAPLA brigades and drive them from their positions on the Lomba as soon as possible. On the 26th and 27th of September, the decisive air battle of the conflict was fought. The South African Air Force wanted to deliver the coup de grace to 21 Brigade after their two unsuccessful attempts to cross the Lomba River. The first force of 4 Mirages, Elephant and Goblin flights, took off on the early morning strike against 21 Brigade. Coming in at low level, they struck 21 Brigade at 07:25. Buccaneers from robot and chariot flights added to the destruction at 08:54. Airwolf and cameo flights of Mirages delivered their deadly payload at 11:40. The 250 kilogram pre-fragmentation bombs dropped by the South African Air Force each contained 38,000 steel ball bearings sandwiched between the high explosive and the outer shell. These bearings would completely saturate and devastate an area, especially as was usually the case when fitted with an airburst proximity fuse. The bombing of 21 Brigade on the 26th was on target and concentrated, and left behind a swathe of twisted vehicles and mutilated bodies. The Mirages and Buccaneers ended off the day's strikes, with strikes at 16:40 and 17:40 respectively. The destruction was such that the 21 Brigade commander was overheard saying to Carnival, "The aviation came through. We did not see them. Everything is fucked." It was not only FAPLA who took casualties from the bombing that day. 7 Soviet advisors attached to the 21 Brigade headquarters were wounded by fragments. Not wanting direct Soviet casualties, the High Command at Carnival ordered Mi-8 and Mi-24 helicopters to evacuate all Soviet personnel. Unlike the situation in 1985, these helicopters would be closely guarded by Cuban-flown MiG-23 fighters. Armed with long-range missiles, these fighters were a generation ahead of the South African Mirages. The most important difference was the Soviet AA-8 missile was an all-aspect missile and could attack aircraft from head-on. In contrast, the South African V-3B Kukri missile was only effective in an attack from behind. A flight of 4 Mirage F-1CZ fighters was scrambled to intercept the MiGs, or if necessary the helicopters. Piloting one of these Mirages was Captain Arthur Piercy. The South Africans had another surprise in store for their communist enemies. Artillery Major Pierre Franken, codenamed the Jackal, had worked out that there were only 2 sites suitable to land the helicopters. Both sites were pre-registered for the South African artillery, and Franken was just waiting for word from the recce's, who shadowed all FAPLA formations, that the helicopters were about to land. The South Africans hoped that if the Soviet command element was wiped out, the FAPLA brigades would fall apart. With MiGs overhead, the helicopters went into the LZ. With calm efficiency, the Jackal unleashed a barrage of mortars, rockets, and shells. One helicopter was hit and destroyed, and 21 Brigade was ordered to pull back later that night. In the air high above the helicopters, things were not going as well for the South Africans. As the supersonic fighters closed in on each other, Cuban Major Alberto Ley Rivas sighted the Mirage F1 of Captain Arthur Piercy in front of him. In a snap-up engagement, Ley Rivas fired two AA-8 missiles at Piercy, who tried to take evasive maneuvers. One of the missiles exploded alongside Captain Piercy's Mirage, spraying shrapnel into the tail section and blowing out the drag parachute. Captain Piercy dived for low level and extricated himself from a combat lasting no longer than 40 seconds. About halfway back to base, the first warning lights came on, indicating a hydraulics failure. The runway at Rundu was short for a fighter jet, and without a drag chute or hydraulics for brakes, it was going to be very difficult for Piercy to land his Mirage. But the Mirage was irreplaceable due to the arms embargo, so he decided to risk a landing rather than eject. The Mirage touched down on the runway, but with no brakes it sped down at over 100 kilometers an hour. Using up the runway, Piercy hoped the sand would slow down his aircraft before it headed off into a donga. The Mirage hit a rock, and the ejection seat fired Piercy into the air. Landing with a sickening thud, Captain Arthur Piercy had broken his 6th and 7th vertebrae. The Mirage, though damaged, was eventually repaired with parts from another damaged aircraft. Captain Piercy was paralyzed permanently following his crash, though he returned to duty as a technician for 3 Squadron. Major Ley Rivas was decorated, and his aircraft is now a museum piece with a kill marking painted on its side. Both airmen retired from their respective air forces in the 1990s.